Welcome to the Parenting Puzzle Podcast with Dr. Daniela Owen, the podcast where we attempt to solve the parenting puzzle together.
Welcome in, everybody. We are excited for our 12th edition, Dr. D, of the Parenting Puzzle Podcast with Dr. Daniela Owen. How you doing today, Dr. D?
I'm well. How are you, Jake?
So good. I know I sent you a text, but little man Isaac won a championship, 8U flag football. So it was a very good weekend in the Loops house. I felt like it was meant to be because the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and then we also won the much more important Super Bowl. We're excited about this episode today. We have an amazing young man coming on the podcast. The dude's 20 years old. He probably is going to be the next Jeff Bezos at some point. But this is an amazing young man. He runs a flag football league. And today we thought it'd be a really cool topic to talk about how sports can impact a child's development, both in a positive way and maybe things and challenges that could come about in a challenging way as well. So, Gavin, we are super pumped that you're on the podcast today, and we can't wait to hear your insight. And thanks for coming on. If you want to take a second, maybe introduce yourself, and we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, so I want to thank you, Jake, for having me on. My name is Gavin, and I own and operate a league and program called Louisiana Flag Football. I think we're getting very close to being the largest flag football program in Louisiana. In 2024, we service about 1,200 kids, and we're shooting to get to about 2,000, potentially even reaching up to 3,000 kids. We operate leagues in Thibodaux. We have a league in Assumption Parish, south of Fourche / Lockport, and we're also working to get into Houma, Louisiana. As you can see right here, Jake's pulling up our homepage. We do all of our registrations through this website, so I appreciate Jake for giving us a little shout out.
But just to kind of get us started here, today we want to talk about sports and how sports can be impactful in a positive way, obviously building bonds and having a commitment and committing to something, right? But there's also some challenges that arise. I think I want to start with this, Gavin. You've been involved with sports and flag football since you were a little kid. So, and it might be hard to think back, but either maybe stories from what you've seen or your personal childhood, how have you seen being involved with something like flag football or Louisiana flag football? How has it positively impacted kids? What are you seeing out there?
So there's two things that come to mind when this question arises. First and foremost, is the most obvious thing is physical activity. Today's world, as many of you know, as we're on technology at this moment, a lot of kids are kept on there almost that they there's an attack on their physical and physical and mental well-being. So when you get involved with a sport, it promotes obviously physical activity, working out. But another thing I want to cover is it gives a child somewhat of a purpose. So I think all humans have a purpose, and when you have that purpose and you see that purpose, you operate differently. A kid is not going to know a career purpose or anything like that at a young age. But when they know, hey, we got a Super Bowl coming up, it gives that kid something to work towards, and it gives that kid a reason to have a different mindset and maybe act better in school or try to get better grades or anything along those lines,
Hey, Gavin, I love that. Because here's a funny story. And Dr. D, you're the star. I promise I'll shut up at some point. But, okay, so we're the Super Bowl, right? Saturday was the Super Bowl, right? That's the biggest game these kids have ever had. I had two kids, I'm not mentioning names because I know some parents listen to this podcast, that were so tired that we were worried if they could play in the game, not because they were sick, but because, like you said, they were up till late hours of the night playing video games, right? So imagine what these kids would be doing if they didn't even have that driver of, I got a championship, right? But even with that, there's still that struggle, right? I love that part. Kids these days just want to be on the screens all the time. We actually talked about that in a previous podcast about how to set limits around screens and how to get kids outside and not so codependent on the phone. because like things are different, man. When I was 12, 13 years old, I didn't have a phone. My parents were like, you outside until the street lights come on. And we didn't want to be inside. We were outside playing football and breaking our arms, and maybe some of it wasn't great. But yeah, I totally agree with the exercise part. Like, get these kids outside and not playing Game Boys all day. I love that, man. That's a great point. Dr. D, I'll turn it to you.
A strong correlation between mental health and physical health. And when we think about kids being on devices, even gaming and playing a video game, there's not, even when they're playing with other kids, there's not that same teamwork and having to coordinate and communicate and collaborate together on the field to accomplish a purpose and attempt to win a game or actually play their best. And so I really appreciate what you said, Gavin, because it brings such an important element to kids' lives that like Jake, you used the contrast to you were practicing this all the time when you were a kid, but kids these days are not practicing it as much, which makes formal sports and sports leagues more important than ever by having these coordinated, organized games available for kids to participate and learn these skills on the field. So I really appreciate you bringing up that point. It's extremely important.
So like, and this could be from your playing days or what you've seen through I don't know how you've been running the league for 3 or 4 years. So that's a ton of season between spring and fall and winter and summer and all that stuff. But what about when there's like a disappointment? Do you have any thoughts on that? So maybe a kid doesn't win the Super Bowl, or it's not a great season for their team, right? Or, I mean, Isaac's been there. I mean, this was our first successful year, which means every other season we didn't reach the ultimate goal, right? So there's disappointment there. So like when a kid is struggling with the disappointment of maybe they lost the Super Bowl Saturday or they didn't make it to that point and they're struggling through that and upset. You have any thoughts on how that's building resilience, or how parents should, or how you would handle that, or talk through that with one of your players? Because I know you coach, right? You coach the 10U team and you coach several teams. So like, how do you handle that with your players specifically?
So with my players, I never get frustrated when they make a physical mistake. Like if a kid drops a ball, telling the kid you need to catch the ball doesn't really accomplish much. Kid knows he needs to catch the ball. The things that frustrate me are the mental mistakes that they make, especially when it's my little brother, because that's usually who I'm coaching. And I try to just mainly promote focus through the mental mistakes. You have to guide them through where they messed up. And that's the best way for them to learn. And they can take that skill into all aspects of life. You have to look at the root cause of the problem. It's not just, you dropped the ball. It's, well, you dropped the ball because you didn't run the route right, because you weren't paying attention in the huddle. You know what I mean? So you got to connect it like that. A big thing I see with kids losing is a term called adversity. And in my playing career, my high school coach always preached you have to battle through adversity. It's really important that a lot of times it comes down to the coach and the parents. If the coach and the parent are doing their job properly, they can teach that kid what adversity is, how to overcome it, and ultimately become a better person in society, because we're all going to go through adversity and stuff like that. So I think like a term I've always heard is, yeah, we got the loss, we got the L, but it's not a loss, it's a learning point. The L stands for learn. So if you can teach a kid to learn in a loss and learn in a down point in life, or learn through adversity, they're going to grow. So that's kind of how I like to paint it.
Yeah, that's really good. Dr. D, any thoughts for you?
I do, but I was hoping I could ask you a question first, because in addition to being a dad, you're also a coach. So how do you talk to your players about adversity, Jake?
Some rough games. So I would say like this is like I've been coaching for a while now. This is my 5th or 6th season. This is probably our first like success. At the end of every game, I typically pick like a offense and defensive MVP for the game. And either they get to break down the huddle, or it's something super simple like that. And what I find is when somebody doesn't win the offensive, defensive MVP and they think they maybe have a case, they get really upset about that. I've even seen it to the point of like tears. You know, we're dealing with 7 and 8 year olds here, right? Like, Coach Jake, why I didn't win MVP of the game? And what I tell them is, look, you had a great game. This is nothing that you did wrong. You know, this is just, let's celebrate this other kid that had the ball. Hey, and you keep working at it because maybe the next game you're going to get it, right? And going back to losses, like we talked about this before where the playoffs happened, and even after the first loss to the Bengals, I think we talked about how like this is just a game. Like we're not minimizing it, but this is just a game, right? This is an opportunity to reach a goal that you've worked really hard. We talked about purpose earlier, right? That was a great point, Gavin. This is a goal and a purpose that you've had for the last few months. But it's not like if you lose this game, be upset, be sad about it, but use it as motivation for next season to work even harder and come back. This is not something that's going to define the rest of your life. Even if you win, it's a great accomplishment. You're probably going to remember it, but it's not going to help you get a job when you're 20 years old, right? So, I think it's important for us as coaches and even as a dad with Isaac, because he told me before the Super Bowl, said, Dad, I'm going to be devastated if I lose this game. And I said, I totally get that. I'll be upset too. But you need to remember that this is a game, and after the game, we're going to talk about it. You have the right to be upset and mourn the loss. But after that, Sunday's still going to come. We're still going to go to the parade and have a good time, right? Nothing's really going to change for those. So, I think it's important for us as coaches and parents to really do the best we can to put it in perspective. This is not everything. Is it important? I'm not downplaying it. Like, of the teams that lost the Super Bowl, those kids should be upset. They had a goal. They didn't achieve it. But it's important for the coaches and parents to remember, like, hey, we got another season. We got another day. And it's not the end of the world. This is something we can easily bounce back from. So that's kind of my thought process with them.
I love what both of you said. I love that the L stands for learn, from Gavin, what you were saying. And I love, Jake, this idea of perspective. And for parents, it's really important for them to keep this in mind, because sometimes parents get really upset when kids lose. They can sometimes have a lot of their eggs in their kids' football season basket and get really, really down about it. And keeping that perspective and realizing that, using that mindset. And I love what you said, you can mourn the loss. That's appropriate to be sad and upset about it. And then not let that define you. And for parents, a big piece of this is helping their kid develop positive self-talk. So when kids are, hearing parents getting all upset and arguing the whole way home about the bad call from the ref and how the coach messed up this, kids are hearing that. So even if parents aren't directly blaming the kid and getting frustrated that they dropped the ball, like you had mentioned, Gavin, even if they're not doing that, it's really important for parents to keep in mind that you want to be able to focus on the takeaways, the learning, the feeling good for the team that did win, and that level of generosity and sportsmanship, which is a really important thing for kids to learn, because kids are taking all that in, and that is coloring how they're thinking to themselves. So if you're saying, oh, we worked all season for this, we blew it at the last minute, and if only this and that, a kid is going to really take that in and feel terrible and upset and down on themselves. It's really hard for us as humans to learn when we're in that sort of shut down, negative, fearful, or angry mindset. On the other hand, when we are in an open mindset, when you give them that perspective, when you say this is a chance to learn, this is a chance for us to come back next season and take all the things that didn't go right this season and apply them in our practices and try them out in our games, you're turning this into a learning opportunity. And when our minds are open to learning and they have this kind of open mindset, that is when we can actually achieve the learning. Trying to learn when our minds are closed is really almost impossible for us as humans. But learning when our minds are open is not. So for parents to be sympathizing with the kids, when they have adversity or have an upset. That's really important. It validates their feelings. And sometimes parents unintentionally invalidate their kids, but that's not what they're trying to do. They'll say something, to your point, Jake, around perspective of no big deal, it's a game. But it is a really big deal when you're 7 or 8 or 14 or 18 or whatever.
Or 33.
Or 33. It can be a really, really big deal to you, right? So when someone says, it's okay, no big deal, it's a game, but saying, I get that you're upset. You totally deserve to mourn the loss of this. And also, it's important for us to keep in perspective that this is a game and we're playing for these reasons, right? And so you're validating the experience, but you're helping your child put it into perspective. And from there, that's where you can move on to, how can I help? What would help you feel better? What can we do? What can we learn? That's where the growth happens. And that's where parents can focus on. But sometimes it's just, there's no benefit in rehashing some of the negatives. You might want to, but let me suggest to parents, if you really need to do that, do it behind closed doors when your kid can't hear you. It's okay if both parents are frustrated, or you call up another friend, or you're texting furiously with another mom. Don't do it in front of the kids, because they're feeling that, they're sensing that. And that energy is not going to help promote positive self-talk and that encouraging mindset that's going to help them enjoy and get all the benefits they can out of the sports they're playing.
Dr. D, just to clarify, you're basically talking about, like, let's say the game's over and the parents are frustrated about a call or the coach or the playing time, not to get into that conversation in front of the 8-year-old or the 10-year-old or the 12-year-old, have that conversation later on when they're by themselves, right?
I absolutely. And ideally, like during the game, if a parent really thinks there was a bad play or something, they've got beef with the coach or beef with the ref, just saying, hey, coach, can I talk to you for a minute? Right? Rather than screaming at the top of their lungs at the coach while all the kids are around, which is kind of scary for kids, right? And so just being mindful of the impact that you might be so in it in your own mind about how important it is, but kids are learning from that.
I have a confession. I probably could get better at talking.
I hope Jake's taking notes. I wanted to pitch in there that, like, sports can be an extremely, like, it's almost like you can put your foot in the door to influence kids with it. Like, with me, I see a lot of kids that have very, very bad upbringings. So, like, Jake probably knows this, but like before the games, I say a prayer before the games. Now, not everybody hears it because only certain people are there, but just little things like that, whether it be praying with them, teaching them to be thankful, teaching them to be sports, teaching them to be a good teammate, all those things are a special way that sports can, positively be something different than what they're used to, and a unique way to influence them doing something they love. So I definitely try to take advantage of that opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's an opportunity for us to, I mean, for a coach, that's why we do it, right? Is to have an opportunity to have an impact on the next generation. Like, I don't have illusion of grandeur that Grander, can't even talk, that Isaac or any of the kids are going to be like the next Alvin Kamara. Like, that's not what I'm thinking, but it is an opportunity for people like Gavin and I to make an impact. Like, we have one life to live, right? That's kind of why we're doing this podcast. Like, am I perfect? No. Sometimes I yell at the refs, but we have an opportunity to, like, shape these kids. And the same thing with this podcast. Like, if we could just get some information out there to help parents, hey, maybe next time that kid has a really bad game and the dad or the mom's frustrated, maybe they watch this podcast and now they could kind of put it in perspective and handle that situation just a little bit better, right? Because, Gavin, you're not here yet, bro, but parenting is really hard. And that's kind of why we started this podcast. So, podcast, she's ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so I think a really important message that we want to put across is that coaches and parents play a big role in how kids walk away from a sporting event that they've played in. if a parent is understanding and validating in the face of adversity and disappointment, then the kid feels heard, but they also have some space to learn from that experience. And I love how Gavin said the L stands for learn, not loss. And so kids can learn when they're in an open-minded space. And so if parents are getting critical with their kid around a loss and, pointing out all the things that went wrong, their kid is going to take that in. Kids take that in, they take it to heart, and that then becomes how they talk to themselves. But if parents are acknowledging and give them space to be upset about the loss, and then also encouraging to keep it into perspective, as you said, Jake, and being able to recognize it's an opportunity to learn and grow, then that helps a kid really get a lot of benefit out of the sport. So the downside is if kids are walking away being really negative, critical of themselves, calling themselves names, talking to themselves in a bad way in the face of things going not as they wanted to, they're going to feel super bummed. But if parents and coaches can promote kids to feel encouraged and learn from their losses, it's really an opportunity on and off the field to really grow. And to Gavin's point, sports are a really good place to give kids purpose, to help benefit their mental and physical health, and also to really potentially be very different from other aspects of their life. And so having those positive opportunities is a wonderful reason why we want to encourage kids to be involved in sports and other physically active ventures.
I love that. Dr. D, I think you close it up really well. As I say at the end of every episode, we really want to get this message out there, and we want to get good science-based information about all kinds of parenting topics out there in the world. So if you like this podcast, please go find Dr. D's YouTube. Go find the Parenting Puzzle. We're everywhere. We're on Spotify, Apple Music. We're on YouTube. And then also, Gavin, man, thank you so much for jumping on. Hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. It really helps us out and lets others discover the show.